His crimes were so horrific that not even all the details could be released to the public. Serial killer Albert Fish has been described as the most evil and disturbing individual to ever live. He committed the most terrible crimes against children that I've ever read, and then he sent a letter to his victims' parents describing in gruesome detail what he did to their child. Albert Fish was born on May 19, 1870 in Washington, D.C. His father was 75 years old when he was born and 43 years older than his mother. His father passed away when he was only 5 years old, and then his mother was struggling so much that she gave him up to an orphanage for 4 years. The orphanage was absolutely terrible. Albert was being abused by the staff and other children every single day. But it was here that he realized that he got pleasure from pain and seeing other people in pain. In his early 20s, he moved to New York and became a male S-worker, and it was here that he said he began to regularly essay children under 6 years old. Albert said at this time that his victims were homeless children, orphans, African American, or mentally disabled, children that Albert felt like the police wouldn't investigate if they were hurt, essayed, or vanished. When Albert was 28 years old, his mother arranged for him to marry a 19-year-old girl, and together they had 6 children. Even after Albert was arrested, all of his children described him as being a great man, and when you hear the details about what he did, you're definitely going to be side-eyeing that comment a little bit. After a few years of marriage, Albert's wife actually left him for another man. He did remarry, but his second wife actually divorced him after only 10 days of marriage. And in a time where divorce was incredibly rare, I think this really shows what kind of man he was. Albert's mental health was declining rapidly. He was extremely mentally ill. Albert began to have delusions that God was telling him to hurt himself and others, especially children. He would put needles in his body, all over his body, including his own manhood. He crafted a paddle with nails sticking out of it, and he would hit himself with this paddle and even instructed his own children to hit him with the paddle. It was also around this time that Albert got interested in the idea of eating people. When he was around 40 years old, he started a relationship with a mentally disabled 19-year-old boy named Thomas Keaton. After he earned Thomas's trust, he held him captive in an abandoned area for 2 weeks where he tortured him, and then he cut off half of Thomas's manhood and then just left him there. To this day, it's unknown what happened to Thomas after this and if he even survived. At this point, Albert had gone undetected for decades and he became more confident and bold. On July 14th, 1924, he kidnapped the 9-year-old son of a police officer named Francis McDonald, so very different victim than he previously had abducted. His body was found shortly later by a group of Boy Scouts, and he had been essayed as well. And since Francis came from a respected family, his case was being properly investigated. Actually, over 250 officers, including his own father, were assigned to his case, but it sadly went cold quick. About 3 years later, a 3-year-old boy named Billy Gaffney was playing in his apartment building with one of his friends when both of the boys vanished. His friend was found shortly later on the roof of the apartment building, and when they asked the child what happened to 3-year-old Billy Gaffney, the child said the boogeyman took him. Billy Gaffney's remains were never found, but later Albert did confess what he did to Billy, and it is easily the most horrific, disturbing thing I have ever read. Not all the details of what 3-year-old Billy endured were released to the public because they were that gruesome, and it honestly shocks me because what was released to the public is completely brutal. The toddler suffered horrific torture before succumbing to his injuries, and this is the first known time of Albert eating one of his victims. The 1920s in America is known as the Great Depression. American families were suffering financially like we'd never seen before, and that included that of the Budd family. So their 18-year-old son put a classified ad in a newspaper looking for work, and within days received a response from the 58-year-old Albert Fish going by a different name. He offered the young boy work at his farm, a farm that did not exist. Albert visited the Budd family household to pick up the young man to take him to his farm with the intention of the young man being his next victim. But when he was introduced to the young man's family, he met the young man's 10-year-old sister, Grace Budd. Albert told the family that plans actually changed and he had to go to his niece's birthday, and he asked if 10-year-old Grace would want to go with. He said that he would bring her back later that evening to take her brother back to the farm for his new job. Grace's father agreed to let the stranger leave with his 10-year-old daughter and asked for the address of the party. When the stranger and their daughter never returned home, her father went to the address that the man had given, the address of the party, and realized that that address did not exist and that his child had been kidnapped. 7 years would go by and Grace would never be found. The family was still grieving the loss in November of 1934 when they received a letter that described in gruesome detail how Albert killed and ate their daughter. I mean, that is just something that is impossible to even imagine. But the envelope that the letter was sent in was able to be easily tracked back to Albert Fish, and he was arrested. During Albert's trial, his defense tried to claim that he was mentally unwell and was legally insane, and although the jury did believe that Albert was insane, they strongly felt that he deserved the chair more. So Albert was found guilty and sentenced to death, and on January 16, 1936, he was executed at the age of 65 years old. Before Albert's execution, he wrote a statement several pages long and gave it to his lawyer, but his lawyer has come out and said that he will never show what Albert wrote to anyone, because it is the filthiest thing he has ever read, and to this day, his statement has never been released to the public. During Albert Fish's life, he worked across the entire country and was actually a suspect in many children's deaths, but anytime they were suspicious of him, he would just move. So to this day, it's actually unknown how many victims Albert Fish has. Some say 15, some say 100, some say 400. But Albert Fish did one time say that he has one in every single state. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. You are definitely brave, because this is probably the most disturbing video I have ever made and researched. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. I'm sure you guys are going to have some really strong thoughts. While you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you next time with the next video.